I just felt completely out of my element for that scene.
Thing I know, like I get these massive pains, like just shooting up into my ear, and I'm like, it's just anxiety. It's like, at one point I had heart palpitations. I'm like, okay, thing that I go through, whether it's pains or, but I think that's just part of playing this role. And
what are these words? Like, these are holy, holy words said by the holiest being that ever walked the face of the earth. I shouldn't be doing this. This feels wrong. And
it's easy to see the finished product, the lights, the cameras, the carefully crafted miracles on screen. But what you don't see is the weight an actor carries when he's portraying Jesus Christ. Portraying Jesus Christ on screen is not a typical acting role. It's one that invites pressure, reverence, and, for some, deep spiritual encounters. For Jonathan Roumie, playing Jesus in The Chosen turned into something far more intense than he ever anticipated. Millions have watched The Chosen, moved by his raw, emotional portrayal of Jesus. But behind the performance, Roumie quietly battled something invisible, and for a time it nearly broke him. And by the end of this video, you'll hear what Jonathan stated by lightning struck the cross on set, and how Jonathan interpreted it as a supernatural sign.
As it went on, I just had to stop the production for a moment to talk to the director, to Dallas Jenkins. And I said, can we just slow down a second? And he said, what's going on? And so I took him aside. I said, listen, man, I'm having a hard time right now. Like, I was starting to feel panicked and overwhelmed.
It started during season 2. The team was preparing for the Sermon on the Mount, a monumental moment. Hundreds of extras stood in silence. Cameras rolled, and Jonathan stood at the center of it all. And then it hit. A sharp, unexplained pain pierced through his ear. His heartbeat spiked without reason. His hands began to shake. He couldn't breathe.
And it started to feel like it was creeping into that, and I didn't know why or how. Well, I kind of knew. I thought I knew why and what was going on, but
No fever, no warning, just a rush of panic, like a force was trying to stop him from speaking the words of Christ. In that moment, it didn't feel like stress. It felt like something darker.
I just said, hey, can we slow it down? And he said, what's going on? And I said, I'm saying these words, and hearing myself say them, I don't feel worthy to be saying them.
The symptoms would appear on emotionally loaded days. Scenes involving forgiveness, grace, or Christ's miracles. The more powerful the message, the more intense the pressure. He called the director and asked him to slow down and then settled his spirit.
This is why I tell this story, because it drives home the point of the gift that I've been given in playing this role.
Then later he told about the attack during the Last Supper, how it started subtly. A strange tightness in his chest, a pain in his ear that had no medical explanation, just a growing sense that something invisible was pushing back. Then his heart began to race, pounding in a way that left him breathless, panicked.
we started filming, those 2 weeks was for the Last Supper, and I had my spiritual director. He came out to be with me, and I was sitting in the hair and makeup chair, and next thing I know, like I get these massive pains, like just shooting up into my ear, and I'm like, it's just anxiety. It's like, at one point I had heart palpitations. I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't know what's happening, but I'm just...
Jonathan did something rare in Hollywood. He didn't power through. He didn't call a medic. He texted his spiritual director, "Please pray. Something's wrong." Within minutes, the pain began to subside. His heartbeat slowed. The fear lifted. And Jonathan knew this wasn't just nerves. He was in the middle of spiritual warfare.
And I texted my spiritual director, who was in the other room, and he's like, "I'm saying a rosary for you right now." And in 15 minutes, it all went away and everything was fine. But I think kind of speaking to what the sort of attacks and things like that, I think the spiritual attacks kind of manifest themselves in so many different kinds of ways. Maybe that's some of it. Maybe that's just physical anxiety. Maybe that's just me trying to do the best I can and not, ruin it for Jesus. So that's been my state of mind for several months, especially.
That was the moment Roumie knew he was dealing with something spiritual, not emotional, not psychological. and not physical. The battle continued off camera. There were days he sat in silence before filming, unable to rehearse, unable to speak. He would cry without knowing why. The words of Jesus, words he had rehearsed, suddenly hit him in ways he couldn't predict.
I was overwhelmed with emotion. I was like, sorry. Because that means the journey's almost over.
And yet, the crew stood still. The cameras rolled, and something real passed through him, like he wasn't acting anymore, but being used for something divine. The weight of the role began to bleed into his life. Jonathan started praying more. He added fasting. He leaned into confession. He wasn't just performing Jesus. He was living closer to him than ever before.
You experience more escalated levels of spiritual warfare the longer you've been in this unique role. What are some of the ways you fight spiritual attacks?
Well, I fight any and all spiritual attacks with prayer, with the Rosary, Divine Mercy, the Angelus, all of those. I feel like I've become more hyper aware of spiritual warfare, and I've probably sensed more attacks.
But that closeness came at a price.
I just felt completely out of my element for that scene, because all of a sudden now I'm saying these words that Jesus said to these people that are like looking at me, and I'm there, and I'm like, what am I doing here?
Offset is your own personal relationship with Christ and how that has grown or changed as you've played this role. Because when I met you 5 years ago and we were doing The Two Thieves, I wouldn't describe you at nearly as tuned in and close to Christ as you are now. Is it accurate that you're getting...
Jonathan described how he is close to God and lasts these years.
To my knees, and I said, God, if you want this to work, if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm here doing what I'm supposed to be doing on this planet, I'm in the right place, you got to help me, because I can't do this on my own. I've been trying to do everything I think you're telling me to do, and it's not working. So you know what? I just turn it over now. You got to step in and take the reins. And that very day, a couple things happened that changed my life circumstances and made me realize that, okay, this is how it's going to be? Okay. Complete and utter surrender.
Dallas Jenkins and Jonathan Roumie remember the moment vividly. The crew was gathered. Extras stood in reverent silence. This was it, the Sermon on the Mount. Jonathan stepped into frame, robes swaying in the breeze, the eyes of hundreds on him, and millions more to come. He opened his mouth to speak, and everything fell off.
And in the script and in the scene visually, we don't see you on screen much. The preaching is mostly in the background, because that scene, like a lot of scenes in The Chosen, is less about the miracle, it's less about what Jesus is saying as it is about the response to it. So I wasn't taking that scene that we were about to shoot of you as seriously, because it's like, oh, he's not even going to be on camera much. This is more about the people's reactions.
There wasn't a technical problem. The lights were perfect. The sound was clear. But spiritually, something was wrong. It wasn't acting. It wasn't a performance issue. It was deeper. Something unseen. Something pressing down. Dallas could feel it too. He looked at his lead actor, overwhelmed, breaking, and he made the call. Cut. The weight of the moment was too much.
All of a sudden now I'm saying these words that Jesus said to these people that are like looking at me, and I'm there, and I'm like, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. I felt like, I'm like this, and I told him, like, this just feels wrong for the moment. But I know I'm here for a reason. I'm here to say this for a reason. I'm here, and somebody else isn't here. So I have to take that into account and know that God's trusted me to represent his son in this project. And so I can't dishonor that.
That day wasn't about forgotten lines or poor pacing. It was about spiritual resistance, the kind that rises up when truth is about to be spoken. Because when you speak Jesus' words, the enemy listens.
For a reason God saw fit to put, for whatever reason, God saw fit to put me in that role.
The more light they brought to the world through The Chosen, the more darkness pushed back. Production delays, financial tension, cast illness, and spiritual attacks, especially on Roumie. He described it as resistance, invisible, persistent, and personal. Sometimes it was physical, sometimes emotional, sometimes atmospheric. Every time we tried to film a key moment, he said, something would go wrong.
The similar kinds of questions like, what's it like to play Jesus, basically? And he's like, he's unplayable. You can't play Jesus. He's unplayable. Meaning, like, how do you wrap your mind around Jesus Christ, divinity, humanity, hypostatic union? Is that right? Mm-hmm. And so I can't even begin to think about. Well, I know what it's like to play divinity. I don't. I only know what it's like to be human, and woefully so, and failingly so, and so all I can do is bring the utmost of my humanity and my intention to and desire to serve Christ and to honor Him and to get out of the way of the Holy Spirit and try to understand through the help of the Holy Spirit.
Even when the attacks stopped physically, the spiritual weight remained. Filming moments like the Sermon on the Mount, the Last Supper, or the Crucifixion carried an intensity he couldn't have imagined.
They've been developing this affinity, this genuine affection for Jesus. It's like, whoa, that's what it is. That's what we all need to feel. That's what we should all feel about Jesus going to the cross. And, what happens when he first gets slapped? I mean, I think people are going to be like,
I know that guy.
Yeah.
Don't slap him. I like him. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
I'm really curious how people are going to perceive it and receive it. Even what we filmed this season for season 5, it was Holy Week. So, Jesus comes into Jerusalem, everything that happens in Holy Week.
Have you filmed this yet?
It's tough for me.
Yeah, because what's your schedule like? I bet it's grueling. And do you sometimes think, I hope I have enough in me enough in the tank to get through this, especially as you go towards the cross? That's going to be personally exhausting, but I imagine spiritual attack and spiritually exhausting.
Yeah, I'm just kind of coming out of this experience, so I don't want to complain too much, but I'm honestly exhausted.
But Jonathan wasn't the first to go through this. Jim Caviezel, the actor who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, was struck by lightning while hanging on the cross. His shoulder was dislocated. He suffered pneumonia. He was nearly killed during filming.
Ever had, because I know if I die, I'm going to heaven. I got to the top, about the 5th take. The clouds were so low. The thunder and lightning was the sound of a howitzer. It was so powerful that you could feel the earth move.
Yeah.
And I saw 2 people that were about as close as these 2 are to me, and their eyes were looking up and they were watering like they were going to cry. And my hair, I couldn't feel it, and I heard a huge gasp in the audience because they saw something.
Jonathan later reflected on that story, not in fear, but in understanding. When you step into the story of Jesus, it's not just a performance. It's an invitation to suffer with Him. And that invitation came crashing down, literally, during a scene that shook everyone. As they filmed the Crucifixion, a storm rolled in. The skies darkened. And then, without warning, lightning struck the cross. It wasn't just a special effect. It was real. Everyone on set froze. No one said a word. Jonathan talks in a show about the lightning at cross and how interpreted it as a supernatural sign, and he could sense that.
Praise Jesus at this point.
That did happen, didn't it?
Happened to Jim, yeah, while he was on the cross. So I'm
him
praying
what
that doesn't
like?
happen.
That's right. We're going to make sure it's a real clear day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he tell you what that was like?
I mean, it's
just crazy.
Yeah, it basically that's kind of what the reaction was. It's like I think he's been able to make sense of it as just being part of Christ's suffering at the end of the day. You know, everything that he experienced, dislocating shoulder, he had heart surgery, he had all these things happen to him. As just offering it up, that I go through, whether it's pains or this other scene that we had in Utah. I was having palpitations every time I did this, and I'd never had them before. I'm like, this is so weird. And there was no explanation, and I had my heart checked out, and everything was fine. I had and for those doctors that have reached out to my publicist when I've talked about this once before, I'm okay. I've got somebody, so thank you. God bless you.
For Jonathan, it wasn't terror. It was clarity. It was the ultimate reminder that what they were filming was not just entertainment. It was spiritual warfare. And spiritual territory comes with spiritual resistance, but also with divine presence. Roumie had already been carrying the spiritual toll of the role, but this was the moment that made it impossible to deny. Portraying Jesus came with real spiritual consequences. It wasn't just attacks. It wasn't just pressure. It was a calling, and callings demand suffering.
I mean, even a modicum of the experience that you had, even like a percent of a percent of a percent, to be able to understand authentically and portray authentically what you went through. And when I don't necessarily have that anymore, I don't know. I don't know what it'll be like. I mean, I'd probably be pretty down for a while. I think everybody, when you're on a show for so long and then you don't have it, there's a little bit of a depression, I would imagine, you know.
And he started asking how he could endure it for something bigger than himself. He leaned harder into his spiritual routines: morning prayer, Eucharist, confession. He kept a rosary on him at all times. He fasted. He received spiritual direction weekly.
Walk anymore. I'm near crippled. So the frustration, and you, am I correct too, Jonathan? Like, I'm thinking when Jesus is not confronting, but when he sees Martha and Mary, he kind of can't figure it out either. He's kind of, when his chosen are saying to him, we can't figure you out. Am I correct? Sometimes he looks at his father and saying, I can't figure you out. Is that true?
You know, I think we leave a lot up to
Sure.
the discretion of the viewer.
Because at that point, he no longer saw himself as an actor on a set. He saw himself as a vessel, one chosen not for comfort, but for mission. And mission, he now understood, requires battle. This only fueled him. Because with every scene shot, every line spoken, every miracle reenacted, millions were being moved. People wrote letters saying their marriages had healed. Addictions were broken. Prayer lives were reignited. And every time Jonathan read one of those stories, it became clear this pain had purpose.
I certainly hope so. Yeah, I mean, I would see it as that. And I see my role in that as somebody who wants to use his gifts and talents to serve God and shedding the light of the gospel in society.
The Chosen has had widespread appeal to viewers across the political spectrum, the cultural spectrum. You've been on shows with people who, you know, most people, not everybody agrees with, but they like your role. Why do you think that is, that it's had such a wide appeal?
You know, I think the truth is undeniable. I think Jesus is for everybody. I think people that meet me realize that the only agenda I have is to spread the love of God everywhere I go to the best of my ability.
In the quiet between scenes, he would often retreat alone, not to rehearse, but to pray. He would ask God for strength, not to be a better actor, but to not get in the way, to let Jesus shine through, even when his own soul was weary.
It's very dark.
I certainly hope so. Yeah, I mean, I would see it as that. And I see my role in that as somebody who wants to use his gifts and talents to serve God and shedding the light of the gospel in society.
The Chosen has had widespread appeal to viewers across the political spectrum, the cultural spectrum. You've been on shows with people who, you know, most people, not everybody agrees with, but they like your role. Why do you think that is, that it's had such a wide appeal?
You know, I think the truth is undeniable. I think Jesus is for everybody. I think people that meet me realize that the only agenda I have is to spread the love of God everywhere I go
to the best of my abilities.
That, he said, was the hardest part, feeling like he was being used for something beautiful while being broken down in the background. But that breaking, it created space. Space for something holy to pass through. And that's what makes The Chosen different. It's not just a show, it's a spiritual experience. One that cost its lead actor not just time and energy, but sleep, peace, and comfort. And still, he continued. In one emotional clip, Jonathan breaks down as he reflects on the show's success. And maybe that's the takeaway. Maybe the reason Jonathan was under attack wasn't because of who he is, but because of who he was representing. The enemy doesn't strike when you're off course. He strikes when you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And if the cross was struck by lightning, maybe it was because heaven and hell both knew what was happening there. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like your walk with God is getting harder, not easier, you're not alone. Sometimes attacks mean you're a threat. And if you're a threat to darkness, it's because your light is real. Jonathan Roumie didn't ask for that fight, but when it came, he chose to stay in it so that others could see Christ. And because of that, millions now do.